All right, we are live. So we'll just give everyone a few minutes to come in, but I just wanted to introduce myself and talk a little bit about what we're doing. So basically, my name is Meryl Franklin. I'm the director of youth services. So you could also say I'm the director of Rainbow Alley, basically, at the Center on Colfax. And so what we're doing today is just a continuation of what we've been doing just about every week since June, which is our Summer Academy Speaker Series. And, you know, instead of doing things in person like we would normally, we decided to make a fully summer-long program. So with that, if you look below and in the descriptions, I've put a couple of links down, and it's also on the screen, for a survey. So basically what we're asking folks to do is fill out a pre and post survey. And if you are a young person watching this, if you fill those out, you can be entered into a raffle for a gift card. And we're actually going to have our first one next week. So that means you can go back and look at the previous videos and do the pre and post surveys for those as well, even though they've happened in the past. So free gift card, like just win-win. It helps us out and you get something out of it. So I'm gonna give folks a couple more minutes to come in, but I just wanted to introduce that. How's it going, Amanda?
It's going great.
Good. Oh God, why is it so hot?
Summertime.
Yeah, it feels that way. All right, I'll just get one more minute and then we'll get right on started. We did have 3 viewers and then it went back down to 0.
People join. It'll be it's like, they can always watch it later.
Exactly, and that's the beauty of this. So we can get started. So if you look at the title of our video, you see that we are going to be talking about long distance hiking. And first and foremost, I want to introduce our speaker, Amanda Jameson. So Amanda Jameson learned about long distance backpacking trails in 2013 and has centered her life, I promise I can read, centered her life around the outdoors and issues of diversity, education, and access ever since. So in walking more than 3,500 miles, Amanda found a balm for her spirit and her voice as a writer. And she is a firm believer in providing young people with the motivation and the skills to have similar outdoor experiences. Amanda's professional background with organizations like Big City Mountaineers and Leave No Trace Center for Outdoor Ethics have given her a knack for translating deep experiences, passing on knowledge, and sharing the wealth. And we're lucky to have her today.
I feel like I'm lucky to be here. Thanks so much for having me. Really
So awesome. So Amanda, what is long distance backpacking first and foremost?
a valid question. Essentially, long distance backpacking is where you put all of the things that you need into a backpack and you carry it with you wherever you go. So that people quibble a lot over how long it needs to be for a long distance backpacking trip. To me, I think it's whatever's long for you. That could be a 5-mile out and back where you decide to sleep out for an evening, or it could be thousands of miles. It's just sort of what feels long for you.
Okay.
And so there are, in addition to trails like we have around here in Colorado, that are a little bit shorter, or you can put together 30 miles at a time. There are also long distance trails like the Colorado Trail, which is about 485 miles, as well as the most commonly heard of like long trails where people do what they call thru hikes. So they hike from one end to the other in one calendar year, in one season, as they call it. And then those, which you may have heard of, are the Appalachian Trail, the Continental Divide Trail, which actually runs through Colorado here, and the Pacific Crest Trail, which runs on the west coast. So 3 pretty evenly split across the country, in addition to so many routes, and so like not on trail, but still long distance backpacking, long distance hiking, as well as shorter routes that other folks have made. But those are the most well-known ones.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I only knew about 2 of those. So
everybody's learning.
Yes, this is a learning process. Okay. So, what brought you to long distance backpacking? You said like it came to you in 2013.
Yeah, so I've only been really in the long distance backpacking community. I only really found out about long distance backpacking in 2013. Before then, I did not know that it existed. I grew up in southwestern Ohio, which is very full of allergens. And so as a small one, I did not really go outside because my face would explode. But in 2013, I moved out to Colorado, which is a little less flat, we'll say, than southwestern Ohio. And I saw the mountains, and I breathed air pretty clean of allergens, although this year is a little rough. And understood suddenly why folks got outside. I'm on moving here. I met a still good friend of mine who was about to thru hike all of the 14ers, so the peaks over 14,000 feet here in the state of Colorado. So there are 58 of those. He was going to be gone for up to 3 months. He was going to travel 1,320-ish miles, and ended up doing over 400,000 feet of elevation gain. And I am the type of person to be like, that sounds very interesting. Can you tell me more about that? And so that began my interest in this like human-powered travel of being able to move yourself across the landscape in ways that we don't often do in the U.S. these days. I went to my first like hiking event in 2013. It was actually a documentary about the Continental Divide Trail, which again, it runs through Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico. So all the way from Mexico to Canada. And turned to my friend who had done a lot of thru hiking and was like, I don't know how to tell you this, but I want that. That's the thing that I want. So I started going to events that were centered around thru hiking. I started talking to more hikers, being more active on forums and, to tell you how old I am, listservs that were about long distance backpacking. Slowly got more involved in the community and finally got out on the trail myself for the first time in 2015.
Awesome. And what trail was that?
That was the Colorado Trail. So it runs from Denver down to Durango. About, again, 485 miles at the time. I think it's slightly longer now. But it sort of follows I-70 for a little bit, goes through like Breckenridge and Frisco, and then curves downward and southward. Joins the Continental Divide Trail for a minute, and then heads on south to Durango. And since then, I've also hiked from Mexico to Canada on the Pacific Crest Trail, so through California, Oregon, and Washington. And I've done half of the Grand Enchantment Trail, which is actually a route. So there's very little actual trail that you're walking on. It's mostly just like finding your way from point A to point B. And that runs from Phoenix to Albuquerque. So Phoenix, Arizona to Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Wow. My feet are hurting just listening. That's a lot of walking.
It is. It's not a small amount of walking.
No. So why would someone want to do this?
One could say, why wouldn't someone want to do this? But I feel like there are plenty of reasons why people would not want to do this. It's certainly not everyone's cup of tea, so to speak. But for me, what really draws me to it is the just feeling of change, the feeling of sort of a change of pace, a change of scenery, and like a change of perspective. So being Black and queer in the front country, which is my fancy word for everything that is not hidden in the back country, it all too frequently I'm required to consider and inspect those parts of my identities when those are only, again, like parts of my identity. Whereas when I'm in the backcountry, with the exception of dealing with other hikers, with resupplying for food, and with dealing with hitchhiking and trail angels and things like that, I get to be me without any of the pressures of what's going on in the front country. And while you can never really escape the front country, and that's not what I think I'm looking for when I go out there, I do get to go and I get to see how far I can take myself and how well I can take care of myself, because there are just so few things that you have to think about while you're out there. You have to make sure to eat. You have to make sure to drink water. You have to make sure to sort of be safe so you're not tripping everywhere. You have to make sure that you're staying on the trail so you don't get lost. And pretty much every other part of your day is yours. You get to decide when your body's tired, you get to stop for a rest. And that can mean just a few minutes of sitting down and eating a snack, or that could mean a 4-hour nap. It's totally up to you. You can stop and eat a wonderful 3-course lunch, or you can pop a Cliff Bar and have that sort of be what you're eating. You get to dictate your reality while you're out there. And yeah, you're dealing with things like weather, you're dealing with things like rough terrain, you're dealing with things like other people on the trail, but it's so different in such a freeing way that I don't think I'll ever fully be done with it. Wow. I think this is something that I'm going to come back to year after year after year.
So why walking? Why not just get in your car and drive cross country?
Yeah. So, you ever been in a plane? for example, you see the landscape and it's going under you, and you get to see it from a different angle than you're used to.
Yeah.
But you don't get to see much detail. And I'd argue it's the same way in a car. Like, it's a little better because you're going hundreds of miles an hour slower, but they're still speeding past you. It's rare that on a road trip, people tend to get a little annoyed when you want to stop and look at every little thing. Like, you can't just sort of like, ooh, that field of flowers. Like, let's stop and take a picture. Like, that gets a little bit old pretty quick. Whereas when you're walking, and particularly when you've chosen to walk by yourself, you get to make all of those calls. Like, maybe you don't want to look at that field of flowers, but maybe you want to spend like 20 minutes like looking at the flowers and the variations in the stalk shape of the flowers, and check out the bees that are visiting the flowers. Or maybe you're more interested in waterfalls, and there are side trips that you can do to see waterfalls, and you can make it your own in ways that you can't when you're like sort of with others or on a road trip, because usually on a road trip, the point is the destination. The point isn't quite as much the journey. Whereas when you're doing a long distance trip, and particularly doing a through hike, so going from like one terminus, so from Mexico to Canada, say, or from the southern terminus to the northern terminus, or the northern, whichever, the point, standing at the terminus is a feeling and is very special and important. And it's just one moment in this sometimes months long series of moments that is meaningful, but having done it a couple of times is less meaningful to me than the journey that it took to get there. And so really like focusing on the journey, focusing on your needs and your wants and desires in those particular moments, and just getting to do something that's it's not special because not many other people get to do it, but it's that not many other people would necessarily like want to. And so if that's something that like calls to you, it's a way of connecting with yourself and connecting with the land and connecting with this like community of people who have done this thing. Maybe that's a bit of an esoteric answer, but
no, yeah, it makes sense though. So yeah, I guess with these really long trails, I mean, like from Mexico to Canada, like you said, like how long are you on that trail for? Because that sounds like forever to me. Just like
it can be. Sometimes it certainly, if you're in the middle of a bad day, it certainly feels like forever. Generally for a trail like the Appalachian Trail or the Pacific Crest Trail or the Continental Divide Trail, those trails are going to be measured in months. So generally 4 months or less, I would say, would be considered fast to do one of those trails. And like 6 months would be sort of pushing it just with the season, because you'd have to just winter comes. And so you have to, if you're planning on sort of taking longer, you have to start a little bit earlier so that you can stay on the trail for that long. And so it's a bit of a balance. Generally, people, just because a lot of these trails are very mountainous, they're very arduous, people tend not to start until the late spring. So on the Pacific Crest Trail, for example, if you've ever seen the movie Wild, that's the one. The general start date is in the end of April, give or take. Some people start a little bit earlier. I started beginning of May, but that's like the general time frame.
okay.
If you're starting south and walking north. If you're starting north and walking south, the window's a little bit different just because there's more snow up north. So you're waiting for all of that to melt out. And so generally the hike for going south starts in like late June to mid-July or so.
Oh, wow.
And it runs through like November. It gets a little bit easier when you're in the desert in the south.
Yeah, I can imagine all that heat.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. So that's a really long time. So how do you feasibly do that since it's so long? Like, I mean, imagine like you can't take that long off of work. Like that gets to be like a logistical issue.
Yeah. So the beauty of the long trails is that there are plenty that are between 100 and 300 miles long.
Okay.
And so with those, if you are physically prepared and you're looking at the right trails, you can do those trails in 2 to 3 weeks, give or take. And so if that's the amount of sort of leave that you have at work or paid time off that you have at work, those are things that you can still do while having like a full-time job. For the 5-6 month trails, 5-6 month long trails, excuse me, those can be a little bit more difficult, and usually people do end up either quitting or they take a sabbatical or they do them at certain times in life that are a little bit easier to manage. So for example, there are a lot of folks who are in their like late teens, early 20s who are taking a gap year, so to speak, before they sort of dig into their sort of professional lives. Likewise, you'll see a lot of people who have just retired who are taking this time. Other people rely on their partners. They save up as much as they can, and then they trust their partner back at home to hold things down and manage that way. Other folks do it when they're just going through a career change. I personally was lucky enough to, during these hikes, be working for an organization where as long as I had clients, I tutored. And so as long as I finished up with all of my clients, I could stop taking clients for a while and go and do anything for as long as I wanted. So that was super convenient for the Colorado Trail. For the Pacific Crest Trail, I ended up actually working for and writing for Backpacker magazine on that trip. And so with that one, I was also bringing in money that was helping with the hike and helping with savings for after the hike, because that's generally what people don't think about. The returning and sort of like how much it costs to get your life set back up. And so it is, I want to acknowledge, a very privileged thing to be able to do, to be able to take that much time off and run around the woods for a while, so to speak. For some folks, it's like me. It's important to find and make the time when I can. It's been a couple of years for me. My last hike was in 2018. So it's been a minute, but I am, COVID notwithstanding, I'm very interested in getting back out and doing some more walking.
That's awesome. So something that I think about when I think about backpacking, and particularly in Colorado, is that like it can be super non-diverse.
Yes.
I don't feel like there's like a whole lot of representation of like Black and brown folk. There might be some queer folk, but I don't know. Like, what was it like for you to go out there? What did it feel like to be like this brown queer person out in the world, out in the wilderness rather. Like, you know what I mean? Like, did you see other people that looks like you? Did you know, like things like that? How was that?
So just like in Colorado, particularly the long distance backpacking community as a whole is becoming more diverse. Even in the time that I have spent in the community, like the diversity has gotten a lot better. That doesn't mean that you necessarily see those folks out on the trail like when you're hiking, just because of the way that like pacing works and when you started and how fast you're walking.
Yeah.
But so, for example, on the Colorado Trail, I think I saw one other person of color in 35 days. And that was not including in town. So in town, it's a little bit different because people live there. And then on the Pacific Crest Trail, there were a lot of folks of Asian descent hiking. There were a fair number of folks of Indigenous and Latinx descent hiking. I could count the number. So to give you sort of an understanding of what it was like, at least in 2016, there were 6,000 people that started, 1,000 people that finished, and I knew of 10 other Black people.
Oh, wow.
And hiked with some of them, did not, only heard of others, got to meet most folks. But it was just very, very interesting at times. Full disclosure, I was not fully out when I was hiking. And so I wasn't evaluating my hike through a queer lens. Or, but when it comes to Blackness and to talking about race, it's just like it is on Facebook these days. Insofar as much as you have very cool people who you find and you adore and you can have really hard, good, like healing conversations with, who are white or other folk of color. And you get the folks who are sitting on the bus back to the trailhead with you, talking about Black Lives Matter in a very derisive manner. So sometimes you've got to just like, for me, that meant like being like, and then speaking up. But plenty of others chose not to speak up in those moments, and that's totally legitimate too, just for safety's sake.
Yeah.
And so just because it feels, the outdoors and the nature feels to me like this magical world where I have to consider my identity less than I just get to be myself. There's no, I always take my context wherever I go.
Yeah.
Especially like these days, just being visibly Black, visibly queer. And people react to those. Just because they're in the outdoors doesn't mean that they're going to react better to those things. When it comes to people in town and when it comes to people who are camping and sometimes drinking alcohol, taking drugs, it can be a bit of a scary proposition. I have been lucky enough to not feel threatened in that way. But I know of other people who have. So it does happen, unfortunately.
That's real. Yeah. So I'm gonna go on a
do it.
No, but because I know you, so but So I know that like you have a trail name. It's basically a name that you go by when you're hiking. And one of my friends tried to give me one as well. Um, but can you tell me more about that and more about like the meaning of that and the culture of it?
Yeah, for sure. So a trail name is an acknowledgement by the hiking community saying that we are essentially saying that we are allowed to be like different people than we are in the front country on the trail. And so maybe you have like an investment banker who is usually like very tight-laced and like in a suit and tie every day. And that person gets to be their whole self in the outdoors. They can bring that investment banking part and they can bring the relaxation. They don't have to, you know how you're one way with your family, maybe a different way with your friends, a different way when you're at work. You can bring and like sort of integrate all of those into yourself on the trail if you want to, or you can be a completely different person. It's totally up to you. And so in acknowledgement of that, people often take trail names, which like you said, are just names that people go by when they're on the trail. My trail name is Zuul, Zuul. It's from Ghostbusters. The back in the olden times did not do as well as I'd hoped Ghostbusters. In that Zuul is a spirit that possesses the character Dana, and one of the Ghostbusters walks into Dana floating a couple of feet off of the bed and asks for Dana, and Dana in this disembodied voice says, "There is no Dana, only Zuul." Lots of people on trail would use that phrasing, "There is no blank." I would frequently chime in with "only Zuul." And I did that one too many times. And essentially, a friend of mine and I were at a water source and reading. So people leave these logs around where essentially hikers get to sign them. They usually put the date. Sometimes they put the time, and then they leave a little comment. A friend of ours, me and my buddy were sitting at the water source. A friend of ours was like 2 days ahead of us and moving very, very quickly. Like he had just been with us a day and a half ago. And we were like, how did this happen? We don't know. Maybe we're just very slow moving, and that's okay too. But we mentioned out loud, like, hey, that guy's fast. And a person that we had never met before, that we would never see again, decided to chime in to our like clearly one-on-one conversation to be like, there is no fast or slow, there is only the trail. And we were like, okay. That's like, I feel you. It's great. Like, no judgment. And like, he was with us and now he's way ahead of us. And so like, he's faster than us. And that's not a bad thing to say about us, but like, it's just a fact. And so we took this story back to our trail family, which is the group of hikers that we were hiking with at the time, or hiking around in the same general vicinity as these hikers. And my friend got as far as, there is no fast or slow. And then legitimately could not understand or couldn't like remember what the person at the source had said. I very helpfully filled in only Zuul. The entire trail family fell over laughing. And that was that. So your trail name is generally something that you get after you do something silly, or you make a very harmless mistake. And it's just sort of I don't know, it's often a fun way to remember what the beginning of the trail was like, because everyone who starts a long trail starts off inexperienced for that trail, right? And so like as you travel, you get more used to things, you get more in the groove, you get more settled in, but it's always fun to, or it can be fun to remember your past mistakes or your past jokes, slip ups, things like that. And that can lead to some trail name abuse. But you are never required to take a trail name that you don't feel fits you.
Right.
So like on the Colorado Trail, which I hiked first, some people really wanted to call me Rainbow. I was like, I don't want that. There are a lot of interesting, just being one of the only people of color on this trail, and that leads back to some weirdness about race, and I don't know that that's for me. And then they tried to call me Jambo because my last name is Jameson. And I've written that looks a lot like Jumbo, which is also, again, like I just didn't want a trail name with racial connotations. Because white people don't have trail names with racial connotations 99.99999% of the time.
That's true.
And so when Zool was offered to me after that incident, I settled on Zool.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds very similar to like what my friend referred to me as, which was two sticks, because
I'm ready.
Know this story.
I'm so ready.
But I was hiking on the East Coast, up Bear Mountain, I think it was. It's part of the Appalachian Trail, and I didn't have enough water. I was hiking with my friend, and yeah, we ran out of water, and I started getting dehydrated, and she gave me these sticks. And, you know, I was getting more and more dehydrated by the minute, and I was going up and down and up and down. I started seeing weird colors, but I made it. I made it to the water source, and we ended up having to camp there because I could not go any further.
Yeah.
Basically, the whole thing was that with two sticks, I could do anything. Like I lived up and down, like could barely control my legs. Like I'm surprised I didn't fall to my death. Not to take things there, but like it was serious of a dehydration situation. So
dehydration, not fun.
So that like, I mean, you know, I haven't done any like super long distance things, but that is what my friend calls me.
That's a good trail name.
All right. But yeah, so that's just my 2 cents about that.
Yeah.
So I think a little bit ago you were talking about safety. And like, I just want to know more about like, how do you keep yourself safe, you know, on the trail? Like what do you bring with you? What do you do in certain situations?
Yeah, for sure. So generally on the trail, there are lots of different things that folks are concerned about when they hear that I go walking for long distances, sometimes across the country. One of them is just like concern for the wild animals that are out there. That generally is like the first thing that comes up. With wild animals, it's nice because most of the time they want nothing to do with you.
Right.
Mice want your food, and sometimes the salt on your clothing or like the salt on your trekking poles if you carry like specific poles meant to mimic the sticks that you had. And then usually bears don't want anything to do with you. I've seen several bears, mostly from the tail end as they run away from me as I like quickly try to like grab a camera. Yeah, I've only really had one sketchy encounter with a mountain lion at 4 a.m, walking down a trail, which mountain lions are not particularly fun because they're very curious And most of the time they don't like mean you any harm, and 99.9% of the time you're not going to see them even if they're out there. But when you do, it can be a little disconcerting. But generally for those, you throw your arms up, you yell a lot, you try to make yourself really big and loud, and they leave you alone. So that's like the wild animals. What I'm like more concerned with when I'm on the trail is the two-legged animals.
Yeah.
And so there's most of the time, as in I only know one instance of this not being the case. Other hikers on the trail are out there for a reason, and it has nothing to do with you. Mm-hmm. They're not going to interrupt their trip to make your life harder, at least maybe in town. That's a possibility, but less so when you're actually out on the trail. That's often why people come into trail families, so again, that's just sort of like a group of people that you consciously, that are like go about the same speed as you do, you're consciously making an effort to stay together. And so you're like planning campsites where you'll sleep at night that have enough space for all of you. You are sort of talking about sort of emergency protocol, what happens if one of you gets hurt. Just a group that you can rely on, and those come and those go. But having a trail family is one way to be a little bit more secure about that. Generally, like I said, I'm not really worried about other hikers because they're looking to accomplish their objectives, and they're less looking to mess with you. But there are a couple of like hitchhiking towns, and then campgrounds that are off of a road are sort of like the three times where it gets a little more nerve-wracking. Hitchhiking is an optional thing for most trails. Sometimes like you can walk into towns, but sometimes they're off of a highway. Sometimes it's a little different. If you do your planning right, just sort of like where you're going to stop and when, you can minimize the amount that you have to hitchhike, but a lot of it it would be really hard for it not to be accessible by car. To be safe in those situations, you really got to go with your gut. There are plenty of ways to tell someone who stops and pulls over and creeps you out, be like, oh, I forgot, I forgot my camera back at that lake. It's about 5 miles back. I'm really sorry. Thank you so much for stopping. Super appreciate it. And then you just leave, like if you don't feel comfortable. But most people, the nice part about hitchhiking is that most people self-select. And so if they are the type of person who would stop to see if something's wrong with you or you need help, like those are the types of people who tend to stop for hitches. And so you can just be like, hey, I'm just like going into this town. I'm happy to pay you a little bit of gas money. Do you mind if I hitch a ride? And the people that stop have been some of the most interesting people that I've ever met. So that's been pretty cool. And you can also decrease risk by not hitchhiking alone. I definitely try not to do that. But sometimes it's necessary. So you do what you got to do and you figure it out. In towns, it's usually pretty easy to know what's safe and what isn't, because word comes down the trail from other hikers. Despite the fact that you're hiking alone for most of your days, it's surprising how much you learn about like the people that are just ahead of you and the people that are just behind you and all of the drama that's going on. So like that doesn't change. But in that hiker talk, like you learn about like what restaurants are like hikers and give the best service, what restaurants have, for example, and this is a true statement, an effigy of Obama hanging from a noose from the ceiling.
Oh.
Yeah. So but because of the way that hikers talk on the trail, it's much easier to keep yourself safe in those situations because you know what situations to avoid and you know what situations in which you're going to be welcome. As for campgrounds, like just off of a road, whether that's like a backcountry, like dirt road, or whether it's off of like a major highway, I always go at least a mile from a road to sleep. I won't sleep within a mile of a road because there are too many things could happen while I'm sleeping. And so for me, when it comes to humans, like sleeping is the most important like way in which I need to keep myself safe. I am not a person to like a lot of. I've had the question asked. We'll say like, do you carry a gun on trail to keep yourself safe? And I don't because it's very heavy. To show you the order of what I'm worried about, it's very, very heavy for something that I'm never going to use. B, like it requires training that I don't have. And C, even though people are like, you could use it against like bears and people, like there's also bear spray. You can use bear spray. I don't know if you've ever had the unfortunate experience of being exposed to bear spray, but it works on both bears and people. So if you're really concerned, bear spray is a better alternative. Still need to be careful with it because you can still hit yourself with it. But definitely a better alternative to keeping yourself safe. And then there's, in terms of like more general risk that you've got in the outdoors, like falling is probably the biggest one, whether that's because you trip and fall or it's in like break something or you trip and fall off of from a height, we'll say.
Yeah.
And so making sure that you stay hydrated is super important. Making sure that you eat lots and lots of food is super important. By the end of, so the Pacific Crest Trail is 2,650 miles long. And by the end of it, I was consuming approximately 5,000 calories in a day and still losing weight.
Wow.
So fueling your body is very, very important if you're trying to do like particularly that long of a hike. Then you have things like weather. So talking about like dehydration or heat exposure, both heat sickness and heat stroke are a big deal. So like trying to make sure that you stay cool. On the other hand, trying to make sure that you stay so not too cool, not too warm. Gotta find a balance. Cold hypothermia can set in, and it can set in at like temperatures exceeding 60 degrees. So you just have to be really careful about your core temperature. You have to watch the weather, trying to stay dry when it's wet outside. And honestly, in the desert, sometimes trying to stay wet when it's dry outside is also a thing. Dealing with thunderstorms that roll in, dealing with stream crossings, like all of those are things that generally you should have a knowledge of sort of like before you head into the outdoors more generally. Even if you don't know exactly what to do in those situations, having a mild knowledge is a good idea, especially if you end up running into those situations alone. Again, for most long trails, they're going to be pretty populated. There are going to be a fair number of hikers on them. And so if you get stuck in a thunderstorm and you don't know what to do, but there are people around you who do know what to do, like the other people on trail keep you safe too. And what I've noticed is that even those people who are less open, shall we say, to brown folks, to black folks, to queer folks, that tends to disappear in an emergency. And everybody does tend to become just hikers. Because people, when push comes to shove, like people want to help more than they want to be away. So it's about like personally sort of like knowing what to do in those situations, and it's also about the community. And being able and ready to chip in when that happens. Like I remember coming across a soon-to-be friend in Washington State on the Pacific Crest Trail, where it was just a really wet and rainy and windy day, and he did not have the rain gear that he needed because we hadn't really run into rain before then. And so he was sitting in the middle of the trail. He had stopped shivering. He couldn't make complete sentences. He couldn't hold on to anything. He was well into like the first stages of hypothermia, which is really dangerous.
Yes.
And even though I had never met him before, both me and the person that I was hiking with for safety, because again, like it's hard to tell when you have hypothermia. And so in those situations, it's safest to walk in twos. We stopped in the middle of the trail. We immediately heated him up some water. We made sure that like he had something warm. We had him take off his wet layers. And like slowly he came back to himself. And then he was just like, oh no, you don't have to like wait for me. You don't have to like walk with me. And we were like, well, we need to because you're a hiker and you're going to get to the next town safely. Like the next town is less than 10 miles from here. We're going to get you there. And so that's what we did. We made a little caravan and we made our way to the next town all together.
Wow. Yeah, no, that sounds pretty scary. So yeah, y'all don't do what I did and not have enough water. And yeah.
Water is very important.
And yeah, make sure you have the appropriate gear. Oh my God. Okay. So speaking of gear, I want to like see the equipment that you bring with you and like, yeah, just see what like, you need to have in order to do these things.
For sure. I laid everything out downstairs in my yard. So I am going to stop my camera for a minute and head down there to be able to show you what I got. Show you what
Awesome. So yeah, so in the meantime, I will lead y'all in a breathing exercise. I know we talked about some serious things involving like life endangering situations. And I know that can cause some folks to feel a little activated. So I want to take this time to just do like a little box breathing exercise. So what I'm going to ask y'all to do is basically take a breath in for 4 counts, hold your breath for like 2 seconds, and then take a 4 count exhale. So, and I'll try to do it with you while talking. So we're going to do this 2 or 3 times. Okay. So I want you to take a deep breath in for 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold for 1, 2. And breathe out for 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Again, in for 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 1, 2, and then breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to do it one more time, and then we'll bring Amanda back. So in. Hold. Out. Okay. So let's see if Amanda is ready for us. It looks like she is. So give a second to add her back. Amanda?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. So this is everything that I carry when I'm out on the trail, with the exception of like one smart water bottle, and that's it. So I will show you the most interesting part, in my opinion, first, which is this tent that I have set up. So this is a Dyneema shelter, which is just like a really fancy name for this fabric here, that is waterproof but also super lightweight. Inside, I've got a sleeping bag, which is a mummy style bag. This one is a 15-degree bag, which is good for most things. I can also try to turn this sideways if that would be a little bit better. Maybe? No? Okay. JK. And then underneath the sleep.
Amanda.
Okay.
I think we lost Kendra.
Oh, we did.
Yeah, because I looked up and I noticed that she froze. So she'll be back in a hot second. There. Okay. I think she's coming.
For sure.
Yeah.
I'll just give it a minute.
Yeah. Internet.
Can't live with it, can't live without it.
This will happen. Oh, she went again. I think she might be having trouble with her internet.
Totally okay. More than happy to take a minute and wait if you'd like to lead us through another exercise.
Yeah.
Or
we'll wait. Oh, okay. I think she's back. I'm just waiting to see her picture before I add her in.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what happened. Let's see. Sorry, y'all. Technical. Yeah, she doesn't know what's happening. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Uh-oh. Oh, she left again. Okay. So yeah. I don't know what the problem is. Okay. I'm sorry, y'all. I know this is really boring. Just staring at me, trying to figure out what is going on.
Hopefully we'll have it back momentarily.
Yeah, I'm working on it, y'all. Working on it. Yeah, she just keeps popping in and out. I don't know what's happening. Yeah. That's really unfortunate. Because, okay, so for y'all watching, since we're just waiting for a little bit. As you can see before, Kendra is our interpreter, our ASL interpreter from Rain Frog Interpreters, and she's great. And it's really important to us to have this be as accessible as possible. And so that is that is why I'm waiting, and I don't really want to talk much because I want to be able to see what's going on, to understand what we're talking about and things like that. I'm gonna wait maybe 1 more minute. I'm gonna try to email her to see what is going on. And then I think we might have to move on, and we'll just figure out how to make that more accessible later on. So let's see. Look. Yeah. I don't think she's coming back right now. I think she's having a lot of internet troubles, but she has the link. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, here we go. Awesome.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. No, it happened. Awesome. Okay, I'm just grateful. Yeah, I just wanted to wait till you came back, Kendra, just to make sure that everybody could understand what was being said. So, okay. So, proceed, Amanda.
Awesome. So I will back out a little bit so that you can see the shelter. So this is home when I'm walking the trails. It seems pretty small on the outside, but on the inside, if you're laying down, it's actually pretty spacious. Actually got a fair amount of room in there. For sleeping, there are a couple of different layers. So this layer here is called Tyvek, and you usually see it on the outside of houses that are being built, but it's really, really difficult to tear. And so if you put your lovely inflatable sleeping pad, as we have here, it's nice and bright yellow, onto pine cones or onto cactus spines. Ask me how I know. It gives it less of a chance to pop, to deflate, and so you're gonna essentially, a sleeping pad, what it does is it insulates you from the ground. If you are warm and the ground is not, it will suck away your heat. So a sleeping pad is just going to provide a little bit of extra insulation for you. And then you got your sleeping bag, and this is a mummy style bag, so it has this nice little hood that I can nestle down into when it's cold. This is a 15-degree bag, and what that means is that I won't die if the temperature gets down to 15 degrees. It's not going to be comfortable, but I won't actually, I will survive an evening at 15 degrees. They do have bags that are 0 degrees. I've seen bags that are negative 40 degrees, which are very fluffy. I want to hug them all the time. But generally what you need for a long distance hike, especially if you're doing it in the summer months, is about a 15-degree bag. Because my feet get very cold and I do not sleep with cold feet. I also have these down booties that I wear to bed just until my feet warm up. These are actually lighter than a pair of socks. So why not go fluffy if you can go fluffy?
Yeah.
This shelter, it's about 4 feet tall or so. Generally, you want to pitch the back into the wind so that nothing's shaking around, and you can see that it's set up with trekking poles. So the more that you can use and reuse items for different purposes on the trail, the better off, or the lighter your pack is going to be, not the better off. This is my trusty backpack. It has been with me for many miles. Essentially, there's just a pouch in the top to put everything in, with a little thing for my what do you call it, the toiletries and such, toiletries and repair kit. This little mesh pouch that I use, and then a couple of hip belt pockets. And those are all the pockets that I have. This very shiny, very high-tech trash compactor bag is actually what I use to keep everything in here dry. So I don't use, some people use a rain, like a rain protector on their pack. I found that those often soak through, whereas the plastic does not. To take you over here, in frame, mostly in frame, is what I wear on a day-to-day basis. So up there, the shirt that I wear, which is synthetic and not cotton. Cotton tends to be, when it gets wet, it loses all of its insulating value, and so it loses any warmth that it might have, which can be very dangerous if you're in a very wet and rainy place. I wear a hiking skirt for funsies. It's got shorts underneath of it, but I just really like to be colorful, so this is what I wear. And then the shoes, I don't actually wear boots. I wear, these are Ultras specifically, so they are basically like your average tennis running shoe, but these are zero drop, which means that they don't have a change from the heel to the toe like most shoes do. For me, I found this to be better for my knees on the trail and ultimately more comfortable. The giraffes that are beside the shoes, those are gaiters, so they actually like clip onto the front of the shoe and they sit around your ankle. As you can tell, probably there are a lot of little holes in the shoes, so they're able to breathe. That way, when they get wet, they dry out really easily. But since they have the little holes in them, they can often get like dirt and dust in them. And the gaiters are just there to help keep some of that dust and dirt out. Definitely want protection from the wet, and that's up here. And so I carry this umbrella, which is, it has that like grayish color on it because it's also solar reflective, so it can keep the heat off as well. And then I have the handy dandy rain jacket, which is one of the most important pieces of gear in my opinion, because when I am wet, I am very grouchy. In addition to having rain layers, you also want to make sure that you have insulating layers. You want to make sure that you're keeping warm and your core warm specifically. So that's going to be over here. So I have a set of like warm leggings that I actually just got from Uniqlo. Things don't have to be fancy to work. Then I have this light-ish down puffy jacket that serves as most of the time. Like if it's colder than what would be required for this jacket, I'm still in bed. So I'm still wrapped in that giant down sleeping bag. But when it's finally warm enough to just exist in the world, I wear this while I'm walking. I also have up here a buff. So it's wool. So again, it's not going to like suck my heat for me, but I use that as a hat. I use it as like a neck gaiter to like a little scarf. And then I also have a pair of gloves. Last bits of odds and ends, the kitchen. So the entirety of my kitchen is just this pot. It has handles on it so that I don't burn myself, or that it's less likely for me to burn myself, because let's be real, sometimes you just get really hungry and you forget. And then this stove, which screws onto the top of this gas canister. And then I carry one lighter. Since ways to keep warm are part of the 10 essentials, so to speak, so the things you don't want to leave home without. So I have this lighter to light the stove, as well as an emergency backup lighter, just in case. A couple of things you really don't want to be without: insulating layers, some way to keep warm, and then sort of backups for those things. So I have this and a backup lighter. This is my food bag. So this is actually made of Kevlar. So the same material that they use to make bulletproof vests, because it turns out grizzly bears really like human food, and B, they kind of have sharp teeth and claws and tend to be able to get into things. So this is a bear bag. You may have seen a bear canister, which is basically like a plastic thing that some bears have actually learned how to get into.
What?
And so with this, essentially, there are these two ties. You pull them through these other two holes and you cinch it. On the screen. You pull them through these other two holes, you cinch them shut. You tie it around a tree with a knot that when you pull on it, it just gets tighter. It doesn't get looser. And that way the bear can smell the food, the bear can crush your food, but the bear cannot eat your food. I have not, since having an Ursac, I have not had a problem with bears. So I don't know how well I do know how well it is. It's been tested by three grizzlies and 3 black bears, not this specific bag, but like the prototype. And none of them can get into it, unlike the bear cans, which they are learning, because bears are very smart, as it turns out. Yes. So that is what I use to protect my food at night. And then last but not least, there are all these little odds and ends. And those are going to be some of the last things I carry. So down here we have water purification. So I usually carry 2 of these smart water bottles just because they're super lightweight. Again, like every ounce counts when you're out there because you have to carry all of it on your back. I also have these water bladders. This one's a 2 liter. Just to have extra carrying capacity that you're not necessarily going to drink from. And then just because you can't drink from every water source, I've actually, drunk from some cow ponds in my day, which is, not ideal, but any water in the desert. In those cases, I actually use a water filter. So it's going to get get most of the harmful particulates out. But if I'm not filtering from cow ponds, I usually use Aquamira, which is a bleach-like solution that's safe for human consumption. So basically, I add part A to part B. It reacts for a minute. I pour it into the water. 30 minutes later, I've got clean water. Up here is my bathroom kit. I use my trekking poles to dig my cat holes, which is how you go number 2 in the backcountry. The ever important hand sanitizer, because you're trying to combining human waste and food does not mix very well. So I carry Purell. These days, I also carry, just because we're in the COVID-19 times, for even short backpacking trips, I carry Dr. Bronner's, which is like just a lightweight soap to be able to wash my hands with. And then I don't use toilet paper because I'm often out. A town stop, like time in between town stops, can be anywhere from 2 days to 11 days. And so for me, I really like to wash myself using water, just because I get a little bit cleaner, a little less stinky, a little less bacteria is allowed to build up, particularly when I mix the soap with the water. So ways to stay clean. Some people carry wet wipes. I have decided to do this. Just a couple more things. This is Garmin InReach. So this is essentially has like a little SOS button on the side. It's it's both a GPS, so it's got maps and stuff in here. And it's also a personal locator beacon. So if I were to get in trouble, I would have to open this up and press the button. And it would communicate with a satellite, which would communicate with the local search and rescue. To tell them where I am. And since it's a 2-way communicator, I can tell them what the problem is, sort of what the conditions are, and anything else they might need to know to try to help get me out were something bad to happen to me. If you're traveling with other people, this is sort of debatably necessary, but since I tend to travel alone, this is a really important piece of gear that I carry, just to make sure that I can keep myself safe. Sunglasses. Those of you in Colorado know it is very bright. The higher up you go, the brighter it gets sometimes, just because there's still snow up there and the snow is reflecting off of things, and you end up taking all of your selfies squinting, which is not necessarily what you want. So sunglasses are super important to protect your eyes. This is the knife that I carry. I usually use the scissors on here. Let's see if I can open it one hand. Nope, that's not the scissors. There they are. See if I can open it one-handed, and the knife. So those are the only really 2 things that I use on this one. Yeah, it's just like a little pair of scissors. The most I've done with it, I've used it to like cut thread to be able to sew gear back together. By thread, I mean floss, because, you gotta keep those teeth clean too. And everything you can reuse is for the best.
And then the knife I usually use to cut cheese, but actual cheese, not the other kind of cheese. Last couple of things, headlamp to be able to see when it gets into the dark times. It also has a red light function. Don't know if you can see that. Just so you're being polite to other hikers. I carry, this is like one of my luxury items. It's for plantar fasciitis, which is a condition that you can develop in your feet. And so I basically just rub this all over many, many sore muscles. It's kind of like a massage ball. It's pretty dense. It's kind of like a lacrosse ball, but it's also got these nice little pokey outy things that feel really nice. A compass. I usually also carry maps, paper maps, in addition to having the GPS. A bug head net. I cannot stress enough. A bug head net. I don't know if you've ever had 1,000 mosquitoes swarm you at once, but like a bug head net. It's important. Usually I don't carry a bottle this big of insect repellent. But I was, the last trip that I took, did not have time to rebottle it. I usually try to make things as small as possible. And then last but not least, since I usually carry my phone as my camera, I also have this little mini battery pack and charger, just to be able to take as many pictures as I want. Because, you know, it's about the journey. We're trying to remember the journey.
Yeah.
And that is what I carry. Oh, my repair kit. So this is like first aid / repair. So it has sunscreen in it. It has different types of painkillers in it, Band-Aids, alcohol swabs, a second way of purifying water. So the two things that I carry backups of are fire and water, because those two things are super important. But it's also got like floss in here, some line for repairing my tent if I need it, some athletic tape to be able to like quickly repair arches. I think there's KT tape in here. Yep. A patch for my tent, just in case like something tears on the tent. KT tape to be able to like quickly repair like shoulders or tape other joints that go awry. Extra batteries for my headlamp, that sort of a thing. But yeah, and then my inhaler, just because again, the COVID times are the times that we are in right now. Just in case.
Just in general, and outside. Yeah. Awesome. Yep. Awesome. Before I ask another question, I just want to let folks know that you can ask any questions in the comments that you may have about the gear, about the experience of hiking. We can see it and we'll answer it once that pops up. So feel free to do that. Oh, okay. Why is it black and white?
Apparently I can put it on infrared.
I was like, what
I learned. Yes. I am going to head back to my computer where it's a little more comfortable.
Okay. I'm going to then switch it back. It's hot outside, y'all. So I don't blame her. Just give her one more minute. There she is.
Thank you for your patience.
Awesome, yeah. Yes, it's too hot out there.
It is. It's a little cooler now, but still not great.
No. Okay. So yeah, you showed us all of the equipment, which was amazing. It's good to just like have a visual of it, and for all intents and purposes, it doesn't look like a whole lot.
It is not. So remembering that like everything that you bring with you, you have to carry on your back is so when I first started hiking, my base weight is what they call it. So it's the weight of everything that you're carrying, not the clothes on your back or your shoes or anything, but just like the things that go in your backpack, minus food, water, and fuel. So that little canister that I showed you.
Yeah.
that is considered your base weight. And so I started the Colorado Trail with a base weight of 16 pounds, which is considered to be lightweight backpacking. I have friends who are willing to sacrifice comfort for speed. I am not that kind of hiker, but some people are. His base weight is approximately 6 pounds. It very much ranges. It very much depends on sort of what you're out there for. Like if you're out there to like see what your body can do and like see how many miles your body can make, which is a totally valid way to be out there. Generally, you're going to want lighter equipment, and you're going to want to worry less about what your sleeping situation looks like, and like sort of what your sleeping bag, like how heavy it is. Versus somebody who moves a little bit slower, they're going to need more water, they're going to need more food, they're going to need more things. And so like the weight gets a little bit heavier. But all ways of being out there are valid in my personal opinion.
Sure. I mean, what happens when you run out of food? Like I imagine
you try very hard not to. So essentially food planning is one of the harder things that goes into a thru hike. Like there's a concept of like a perfect carry where you're eating the last of your food as you're coming into town. I have never done this. They say that you carry your fears. And if that is true, one of my fears is very much running out of food because I have never even gotten close to running out of food over 3,500 miles. So I like food a lot. So essentially when you're food planning, you want to plan out a breakfast, a lunch, or a bunch of snacks for lunch, which is what I do. I snack instead of like stopping. And then like very, very heavy, hefty dinners. Generally, you want to eat most of your food right before bed because sleeping is the time that your body has to absorb all of those nutrients and put them where they need to go. When it comes to repairing muscles, when it comes to brain function, all of those sorts of things. That's the time that it does it. So for me, like I eat my biggest meal at night. Sometimes I will eat a hearty breakfast and sometimes I'll just have like a snack for breakfast. But dinner's like a meal, like a process to like sit down and stuff. Generally, when you're planning your food, you want to plan at least one extra dinner. And you want to bring that with you so that if you do run out of food, you have a dinner put aside that you can ration in whatever way that you need to get out. But again, since long distance hiking is like very much a community, a lot of times if you are running out of food and other people have food that they don't want to carry anymore because it's heavy, they'll give you their extra food. And so in those cases, like you can't really be choosy about what you get, but if you are around other people, you will probably be able to make it through.
Wow.
And if you run into any day hikers, they're often willing to give you really tasty snacks. So very nicely.
So where do you get this food? Like what kind of food? Is it like dehydrated food? I mean, that's just the stuff that I've seen is dehydrated.
Yeah. And that's kind of like the image that people have in their heads. It really depends on what you decide to do. So for me, there are two different basically like methods of resupplying. Either you can go into a town and go to a grocery store and pick and choose the things that you want off the shelf. And like you have to worry about refrigeration in those cases. You have to worry about sort of like longevity, especially if you're going to be out for 7 days. Like it's called a food carry, like you're carrying that food for X number of days. And so if you have a 7-day carry, like you can't get like the softest cheese ever, right? Like you've got to get a cheese that is going to last just like a little bit longer. The other thing that you can do, and this is also true of towns that don't have grocery stores, because sometimes you'll be forced essentially to stop in those. You can also mail yourself food. So that's where I tend to use the more like dehydrated meals, the like Idahoan mashed potatoes with like bacon bits and things like that. But a lot of people do use like really fresh foods. I have a friend who is vegan, gluten-free, and dairy-free. And she is about to get her Triple Crown, which means she will have hiked the Appalachian Trail, the Continental Divide Trail, and the Pacific Crest Trail.
Wow.
And she's done all of that hiking, essentially vegan, dairy-free, and gluten-free. And so it's totally possible it's harder for sure. And you have to do a lot more planning around meals, but people do it. There's definitely like support and resources for that out there as well.
Awesome. So you're saying I have no excuse. Okay.
Listen. Do what you want.
So it can be done.
It can, if you want it.
Okay. That's good to know. I have like a bajillion questions, but I know we're also running out of time. And I just want to, again, give folks a chance to, if they have any questions, to post them. Otherwise, basically, we'll just take up the rest of the time.
Do it.
Asking what I
Don't.
want to ask. But I want to give other folks a chance. You all make me thirsty.
Sorry. Water's really important.
Okay, so we can move on, and if something pops up, I'll bring it up.
Sounds great.
Awesome. So I'm trying to be strategic about questions. So what is an average day like, in terms of like, how do you plan out how long you're gonna be walking a day and things like that?
So you don't is the short answer. So you have, it's like, I'll start with like in like the evening. So I've set up my tent, I've eaten my dinner, I'm laying in bed / on the sleeping pad. And usually the last thing that I try to do before I sleep is I take a look at the map and what's coming up for the next day. Mm-hmm. So that way I know personally before I wake up, like what kind of elevation changes that I'm looking at. So am I going uphill all day, or is it up and down, or is it downhill all day? Because those days are really nice. And so in that, I have a better idea of, based on the speed that I usually go and the energy that I have had the day before, sort of like how many miles I think that I'm going to be able to make in a particular day. So I've got like a rough idea in my head, and that on a trail like the Pacific Crest Trail, like when I'm in good trail shape, meaning that I've been on the trail for a while and I'm used to walking and I'm feeling good, that can be anywhere from 15 miles in a day to 30 miles in a day. It just depends. It just depends. And again, it depends on the terrain. It depends on the weather. It depends on lots of things. And so in the morning, I'll get up. If I'm feeling very tired, I will make myself a cup of coffee or tea. I will try to make some kind of breakfast as well, usually oatmeal or leftovers from dinner the night before, just to have a little bit more calories in me before I start walking. And then I start walking. And again, like I was talking about earlier, that's kind of the beauty of hiking, is when I feel tired, I stop and I sit and I look at the maps, or I read for a little bit, or I stare at the lakeside, or I spend all of my time swatting mosquitoes, whatever the situation calls for. Mm-hmm. And then I walk some more. And in between, like stopping to talk to people, getting off the trail, looking at cool things, taking pictures. By that time, it'll probably be lunchtime. Sometimes, depending on how many miles I'm trying to make, if I'm trying to make fewer miles, I'll sit down and I'll like prepare a lunch. I'll like cook. Other times I'm like, nope, I really need to make more miles than this. And so I'll just shovel more snacks in my face and keep walking. Usually around like sunset. So like if you hold your arm out like all the way and sort of fold your hand in half like I'm doing here, and you point that at the sun, you can get a rough, very rough estimation of how long it's going to take before the sun sets. And so usually when the sun's about a hand, so like about an hour, because each finger is about 15 minutes.
Yeah.
That's when I'll start looking. I'll sit down with the map and I'll start looking for a good campsite for that night. Some trails will actually have campsites that are marked for you. Some trails, you'll just have to look at the map and be like, that looks flat, probably. And sometimes you're right and sometimes you're wrong. But yeah, and so once you find the spot that you want to set up, usually for me it's a little bit before sunset, depending on how many miles you're going or sort of what your goals are. You can set up before I have friends who hike until midnight, and that's just a thing that they do.
Okay.
Just setting up camp, again, cooking and eating, making sure that like you have a water, and water is a big thing throughout the day. So making sure that you have enough water and then some to get to the next water source, because sometimes water sources can be dry. So you want to make sure that you have enough water to make it.
Yeah.
But then it's again like setting up your tent, setting up your sleeping bag and sleeping pad, cooking dinner, reflecting on the day. This is the time where I like to listen to music. I carry headphones, and so I dance around a little bit to stretch out my muscles. I'll also just like do regular stretches. I'll write a little bit because I like to have a record of what I have done in a day on trail. And then by that time, usually I like can't keep my eyes open, and it's bedtime.
Well, that's awesome. So we are very quickly running out of time. And it doesn't look like anybody has put any questions in. So I want to first thank you, Amanda, for joining us in this. I really appreciate you taking the time. And I'm going to put up this lovely link to our post survey to fill out to be a part of, to be entered into our raffle that we're going to do next week. So yeah, I'm also going to put up, before I forget, is how to contact Amanda. If you have any more questions about hiking and things like that. Is there anything else that you want to say to maybe close out, Amanda? Anything you want to leave the listeners?
Yeah, sure. I guess I want to say I started all like in terms of long distance hiking, I started very, very slowly. Not being able to go very far, constantly getting tired, just like not being able to make it up hills. Like everyone was faster than me, and everyone still is faster than me. I was able to make it from Mexico to Canada on my own 2 feet. And so if this is something that you're interested in, and if this is something you feel like you want, you need, you desire, if you have a way of doing it, I definitely recommend it. There's really nothing else like it. And it only requires taking one step at a time. The one thing that all thru hikers say is that you don't get from Mexico to Canada in a day. it's all about incremental progress.
Mm.
And some days it's going to be amazing and you're going to make 30 miles, and other days you're going to make 4 because you're injured. And you have to find ways to mentally cope with all of that, and it's all a part of the journey, and it's a intense, wonderful, beautiful one if you come at it like that. Yeah, I just think it's a really cool way to spend some time.
It sounds like, yeah, a good time to self-reflect and things like that.
For sure.
That's amazing. So yeah, so we are out of time. So I want to thank you again, Amanda. And I want to thank again Kendra for interpretation today. I know we had a little bit of difficulty, but I'm glad it worked out. So yeah, so with that, I'll say goodbye to all of you watching, and be on the lookout for what we have going on next Tuesday.
Thanks, everyone.